At 65, I moved into my daughter's home and immediately noticed the 10-foot fence blocking the house next door. "Dad, stay away from the man," she whispered. "He stands at the fence for hours staring at me, the yard, the house. My husband thinks he's dangerous. So do I." Weeks later, the old man died. Almost no one attended his funeral, except me. As I was leaving, his son handed me a sealed envelope his father had left behind. I opened it and froze. "Thank you for being here. It means more than you know. Tell me in the comments, what part of the world are you joining me? From today, I read every single one. This is Revenge Dad, and this story is one I needed to share. Elements of this story have been shaped for narrative purposes. Names and locations are not drawn from any specific person or place, but the truth at the heart of it. That part is very real. The drive from Santa Monica took 40 minutes, but I had spent 65 years getting here. I sat behind the wheel of my old Ford pickup, the one my late wife Carol had called embarrassingly practical, and watched the GPS tick down the last few blocks. The neighborhood was everything Marlowe had described: wide streets lined with jacaranda trees, craftsman houses set back from the sidewalk, the kind of quiet that costs money in Los Angeles. I had sold my apartment 3 weeks ago. The check had cleared. There was nothing left to go back to. My daughter appeared in the doorway before I even turned off the engine. "Dad!" Marlowe came down the porch steps in bare feet. Her dark hair pulled back the way she used to wear it as a teenager, and she wrapped both arms around me before I had fully climbed out of the truck. She smelled like lavender soap and something baking in the oven. "You're finally here." "I'm finally here," I said into her hair, and I meant it more than she knew. 2 years of phone calls and holidays that ended too soon. 2 years since Carol passed and left me rattling around a 2-bedroom apartment with too many photographs on the walls. Vaughn appeared behind her, leaning against the doorframe, with his arms crossed and a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He was a handsome man, my son-in-law, broad-shouldered, always well-dressed, even on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of man who made a room feel organized just by walking into it. "Silas?" He stepped forward and shook my hand with both of his, firm and warm. "This is long overdue. I mean that." "You didn't have to repaint the room," I said. "Are you kidding?" Vaughn laughed and picked up one of my boxes without being asked. "Carol would have haunted me if I put you in an ugly room. Come on, let me show you what we did." The room was at the back of the house, overlooking the garden, with a window that caught the late afternoon light and turned everything gold. He had repainted it a warm cream color, put in new bookshelves along one wall, and set a reading chair by the window that I recognized immediately. It was the same style as the one I had kept in my Santa Monica living room for 30 years. "And Marlowe told me," Vaughn said when he saw my face. "I found it at an estate sale in Pasadena, reupholstered it myself. Took me 3 weekends." He said it the way a man states a fact, not fishing for a compliment. My chest tightened in a way I had not expected. I pressed my hand to the back of the chair and cleared my throat. "It's good work," I said. "You did good work." Dinner was linguine with clam sauce, a green salad, sourdough bread, still warm from the oven. Vaughn poured a Napa Valley Chardonnay and raised his glass across the table. "To Silas," he said, "who spent 30 years making sure buildings don't fall down and now gets to just sit in one and enjoy it." Marlowe laughed and clinked her glass against mine. Her eyes were bright the way they used to get when she was excited about something. I had not seen that look in a while. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Silas," Vaughn said, settling back in his chair. "This is your home now. Whatever you need, doctor's appointments, errands company, on a Tuesday afternoon, you say the word." "I'm 65, not 100, I said. 65 and stubborn," Marlowe said, pointing her fork at me. Carol's words, not mine. We laughed. The wine was good. The bread was warm. For the first time in 2 years, I did not feel the particular weight of a quiet apartment pressing down on me at the dinner table. After Marlowe went upstairs and Vaughn stepped out to take a work call on the back porch, I stood at the window of my new room and looked out at the garden. The last of the evening light was settling into the hedges, turning the grass a deep, still green. It was a good garden, well-kept, organized, the kind that took real attention. That was when I noticed the fence. It ran along the entire right boundary of the property. Tall and solid, the boards fitted close enough together that you could not see through them. It stood at least 10 feet high, maybe more. The wood was dark, still new enough to be clean, without the weathering you would expect on something that had been there for years. I had been a structural engineer for 3 decades. I had looked at thousands of buildings, thousands of structures, and I had learned early that the thing worth examining is never the wall itself. It is the reason the wall was built. That fence was not decorative. It was not a property marker. It had been built to block something out completely. I pressed my fingers against the cool glass of the window and studied it for a long moment. The garden was otherwise open, relaxed, the kind of space where a family would put a table and chairs and eat breakfast on Sunday mornings. But that fence sat along the right boundary like a held breath, deliberate, total, uncompromising. In 30 years as a structural engineer, I had learned that the most dangerous flaws are never the ones you can see right away. They hide behind fresh paint and clean lines and new lumber. They wait. I told myself I was tired from the drive. I told myself it was nothing. I turned off the bedside lamp and lay down in the good chair Vaughn had reupholstered over 3 weekends in Pasadena. But the fence stayed in my mind long after the house went quiet, solid and dark on the other side of the garden, blocking out whatever was on the other side of it, and I could not yet say why that bothered me as much as it did. I woke before 6 the way I always do and lay still for a moment, listening to a house that was not mine yet. The pipes were different. The morning birds outside were different. Even the quality of the light coming through the curtains was different from Santa Monica, warmer, heavier, filtered through the jacaranda trees that lined the street. I pulled on a flannel shirt and a pair of old khakis and went to find the coffee. The kitchen was empty. Through the back window, the garden sat quiet in the early morning gray, the grass still wet with dew. And there was the fence running the full length of the right boundary, 10 feet of dark wood, standing in the pale light, like something that had made up its mind. I poured a cup of coffee and took it outside. Up close, the fence was even more deliberate than it had looked from my window. The boards were tight-fitted, no gaps, no knotholes sealed at the base, with concrete footings that I could see had been poured recently. This was not a fence someone had thrown up over a weekend dispute about a property line. This was a structure built by someone who wanted absolute certainty that nothing could be seen through it. I was still studying the footings when Vaughn's voice came from behind me. "You're up early." He was already dressed, dark trousers, a collared shirt, a coffee mug in his hand. He looked at me, then at the fence, and something moved across his face so quickly I almost missed it. "Didn't sleep well?" "Slept fine," I said. 30 years of reading structures, hard habit to break. I nodded toward the fence. "When did you put this up?" Vaughn exhaled slowly, the way a man does when he is about to say something he has said before and does not enjoy saying. He stepped up beside me and lowered his voice, even though there was no one else in the garden. "About 6 months ago," he said, "because of the man next door. He told me about Orson Bellamy, the way you tell someone about a problem that has been solved, but still leaves a bad taste. Orson was 70 years old, retired, lived alone. He had moved into the rental next door about 8 months ago, and within the first few weeks things had started happening. He would stand at the boundary line and stare, not glance, not look over occasionally, but stand and stare sometimes for 20 minutes at a stretch, watching Marlo move around the garden or come and go from the car. He had appeared at the end of their driveway one evening, just as Marlo was pulling in from work, standing there in the half-dark, without saying anything. He had knocked on their front door at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and when Vaughn answered, Orson had only said he thought he heard something in the yard and wanted to check. He had photographed their vehicles. Vaughn had seen him do it from an upstairs window, standing at the curb with his phone raised. "I went to the police," Vaughn said. "They came out, talked to him, said there was nothing they could do unless he made a direct threat. So I built the fence." He looked at the structure with the expression of a man who had done what needed to be done. "Marlo was afraid to be in the garden alone. That's not something I was willing to live with. I listened to all of it. The details were specific. The timeline was clear, and Vaughn told it without drama or exaggeration. Just the flat recitation of facts from someone who had already processed his anger and come out the other side into something colder and more permanent. Marlo came out an hour later, while Vaughn had gone inside to take an early call. She poured herself a coffee and sat across from me at the patio table and confirmed everything her husband had said. The staring, the driveway incident, the late-night knock. Her voice was steady, but she held her mug with both hands the way she used to as a little girl when something had frightened her. "He makes my skin crawl, Dad," she said. "I don't know how else to say this. The man is not right. He stands at that fence and stares. Not glances, not looks over, stares. At me, at the yard, at the house. Like he's watching us on a schedule." She set her mug down on the table and wrapped both arms around herself. "Vaughn thinks he's dangerous. I think Vaughn's right. You don't look at people that way unless something is wrong with you. Has he ever said anything to you? I asked. That's the part that scares me most, she said. He never does. He just stands there. Every morning, sometimes in the evening too. Just watching. Her voice dropped slightly. A man who watches like that and never says a word is worse than one who threatens you. At least a threat you can do something about. I watched her face while she talked, and I noticed something that I could not quite name at first. Something that only became clear to me when I started paying attention to which details she reached for on her own, and which ones she was filling in from somewhere else. Every specific thing Marlo told me, the dates, the duration of the staring, the exact words Orson had said at the door, was something Vaughn had already told me first. Her account confirmed his. It did not originate from her. That was not necessarily unusual between a husband and wife who had shared an experience. But it stayed with me. After breakfast, Vaughn brought up my finances with the kind of ease that suggested he had been waiting for a comfortable moment. I don't want to overstep, he said, refilling my coffee without being asked, but I manage a small investment portfolio for a few of my private clients. Given what you got for the Santa Monica apartment, you could be doing a lot better than a standard savings account. The market right now? I appreciate that, I said. I set my mug down and looked at him directly. I'd rather keep my finances simple for now, but I'd like to put it in writing if that's all right with you, just so we're all clear. Vaughn's expression did not change. He smiled and spread his hands open. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable, Silas. Your family. There's no pressure here. I wrote it out by hand that afternoon, at the desk in my room. A simple statement that I had declined Vaughn Hale's offer to manage my assets, dated and signed. I folded it and put it in my wallet behind my driver's license, where I keep the things I need to be able to find quickly. I did not know then why I felt the need to do that. I only knew that 30 years of reading structures had taught me one reliable rule: when something feels over-engineered for the problem it claims to solve. The problem it claims to solve is usually not the real problem. That evening, just before the light went, I looked out my window toward the fence one more time, and on the other side of it, barely visible through the narrow gap where two boards had settled slightly apart, I saw the shadow of a man standing very still in the neighboring yard, not facing our house, but facing the street, watching something I could not see. Vaughn left before 7, his car backing out of the driveway with the quiet efficiency of a man who kept to a schedule. Marlo had an early site visit. She kissed me on the cheek at the kitchen door and told me there was oatmeal on the stove and that she would be back by noon. And then the house was mine. I sat at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee and listened to it settle around me. Old houses talk to themselves in the morning, the tick of pipes, the groan of a floorboard, the particular silence that opens up when the people who live there have gone. I had spent enough mornings alone in the past 2 years to know the difference between a house that was empty and a house that was waiting. This one felt like the second kind, though I could not have said what it was waiting for. I took my coffee out to the back porch. The garden looked different in the full morning light, more open, less tidy than it had seemed the night before. The raised beds along the left fence were overgrown at the edges. A sprinkler head near the back corner had shifted out of alignment, leaving a dry patch in the grass. Small things. The kind of things you only notice when you're looking for them, and I had spent 30 years being paid to look. I was crouching down to examine the sprinkler fitting when I heard movement on the other side of the fence. Not threatening movement, just the ordinary sound of someone in a yard. A footstep on gravel, the scrape of something being dragged. I straightened up slowly and looked toward the gap I had spotted the evening before, where two boards had settled a quarter-inch apart. The man standing on the other side was not what I had been led to expect. Orson Bellamy was tall, or had been once. His spine had the slight forward curve of someone who had lost an inch or two to age, but the frame underneath it was still broad, still substantial. He wore a faded canvas jacket over a flannel shirt, and he moved with the careful deliberateness of a man whose joints had opinions about the morning cold. His hair was white cut short, and his face was the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of paying attention to things. He did not look dangerous. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. He was not looking at our house. His eyes were tracking something on the street fixed on it, with the focused, patient attention of a man who had been watching something for a long time, and was not in any hurry. I followed the direction of his gaze and saw a dark blue sedan parked 2 houses down that I had not noticed before. It was idling. Vaughn's car had already turned the corner minutes ago, but I had the distinct impression that what Orson was watching had something to do with where that car had gone. Morning. My voice came out before I had decided to speak. Old habit. Carol always said I talk to strangers the way other people breathe. Orson turned. His eyes found me through the gap in the fence, and for a moment he studied me with an expression I recognized from 30 years of job sites, the look of a man rapidly recalculating something. Then something in his face shifted not quite to warmth, but to a kind of careful openness. "You must be Marlowe's father," he said. His voice was deep and unhurried, the voice of a man who had stopped being in a rush some years back. "Silas Whitmore," I said. "Just moved in." "I know." He took a slow step toward the fence. "Orson Bellamy." He extended his hand through the gap between the boards, a gesture so natural and so old-fashioned that I shook it before I thought about whether I was supposed to. His grip was firm, and his palm was calloused, the hand of someone who had spent a life doing physical work. "They tell you about me?" he asked, not defensively, just plainly the way you ask about weather. "Some," I said. Orson nodded slowly, looking down at the ground between us. A muscle moved along his jaw. Then he raised his eyes and looked at me directly, not with the calculating menace Marlowe had described, but with something that felt closer to urgency. The kind of look a man gives you when he has been waiting a long time to say something and is not sure he has the time to say it right. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, keeping his voice low, "I'm going to tell you one thing, and I need you to hear it the way I mean it and not the way you've been set up to hear it." My heart rate picked up slightly. I kept my face neutral, another old job site habit. "Watch who walks into your daughter's house," Orson said, "not who stands outside it." Before I could respond, the side gate swung open and Vaughn came through it. He stopped when he saw me standing at the fence, and for just a fraction of a second, less than a breath, his jaw tightened in a way that had nothing to do with surprise. "Silas." His voice was controlled and even. I forgot my phone. He held it up as evidence, then looked past me toward the fence. "Has he been bothering you?" "We were introducing ourselves," I said. "Come inside." Vaughn put a hand on my shoulder, not roughly, but with a firmness that was not quite a suggestion. "I've told you about him. He does this, finds an angle, tries to get friendly. It's how he operates." I let myself be steered toward the back door, but I turned once just before we reached the porch steps and looked back at the fence. Orson had not moved. He was still standing on his side of the gap, watching not me, not Vaughn, but the space between us, as though he were reading something written in the air that neither of us could see yet. That evening, when Marlowe asked how my first full day had gone, I told her the garden was beautiful and that I was sleeping better than I had in months. Both of those things were true. I did not mention Orson Bellamy, or the sedan that had been idling on the street, or the way Vaughn's jaw had tightened for less than a second when he came through that gate. I had learned a long time ago that the best thing you can do when you find a crack in a structure is to keep watching it quietly before you tell anyone else it is there. That night, I opened the nightstand drawer, took out the small notebook I had carried for 30 years on every job, and wrote down the date, the time, and 4 words. "Watch who walks in." I found it by accident, the way you find most things that matter. It was 3 days after my conversation with Orson at the fence. I was looking for a pen in the small desk by the living room window, the one Marlowe had set up for me, with a lamp and a notepad, and a glass bowl of paper clips that I would never use. The top drawer stuck slightly, and when I pulled it harder than I meant to, the whole thing came out an inch too far, and something slid forward from the back. A folded piece of paper, cream-colored, the kind Marlowe had always preferred. She bought it in bulk from an art supply store on Melrose, the same brand she had used since college. I almost put it back without reading it. It was not my drawer, not my paper. But the fold was loose, and when I set it on the desk surface, it opened on its own, and I saw Marlowe's handwriting before I had made any decision about whether to look. She had written a list of questions. Joint account, ending 4471, withdrawal, March 14th, $8, $200. Where did this go? Investment transfer, April 2nd, $12,500 to HBP. What is HBP statement from February? Shows different balance than online portal, which is correct. Vaughn says he explained the March transfer. I still don't understand it. Am I missing something? The date at the top of the page was 18 months ago. I sat down in the reading chair by the window and held the paper in both hands and read it again slowly. In 30 years of engineering, I had reviewed thousands of documents, contracts, load calculations, inspection reports, change orders. I knew what a list of genuine questions looked like, and I knew what a list of questions that had already been discouraged looked like. Marlowe's handwriting got smaller toward the bottom of the page. the last line. "Am I missing something?" was written more lightly than the rest, as though she had pressed less hard with the pen because she was already less sure of her right to ask. I folded the paper exactly as I had found it and put it back in the drawer. At breakfast the next morning, I waited until Vaughn had refilled his coffee and was back at the table before I brought it up. I kept my voice casual, the way you keep your voice casual on a job site when you have found something in the foundation that you do not want the client to panic about yet. "Marlo," I said, "I was looking for a pen in that little desk yesterday. I hope that was all right." "Of course, Dad." She looked up from her phone with the bright, easy smile she had always had, the one that went all the way to her eyes. "Did you find one?" "I did." I stirred my coffee. "I also found a piece of paper, some notes you'd made, about some account questions." I looked at her directly. I didn't read past the first line before I realized what it was. Just wanted to mention it in case you were looking for it. Marlo's smile did not disappear exactly. It shifted, became something slightly more careful, slightly more managed. She glanced at Vaughn, a quick sideways flicker, and then back at me. "Oh, that," she said. "That was ages ago. I was confused about some transfers. I don't always follow the financial stuff as well as I should." She laughed softly, but the laugh had an edge of apology in it that the situation did not require. Vaughn walked me through it. I must have just misunderstood the statements. "Of course," I said, as long as it got sorted out. "Completely," Vaughn said from behind his coffee mug. His voice was warm and entirely unbothered. "Marlo's brilliant at everything except reading bank statements. I keep telling her she should let me handle all of it." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, and she smiled at him. And the smile was real. I could see that, which was the part that sat in my chest like a stone for the rest of the morning. I must have just misunderstood. I had heard that sentence or versions of it at job sites more times than I could count. It was what people said when they had been told their concern was wrong often enough that they had stopped trusting the concern. It was not the sentence of a woman who had received a satisfactory explanation. It was the sentence of a woman who had learned that asking the question cost more than leaving it alone. That afternoon, the three of us sat in the living room, after lunch, Marlo reading Vaughn on his laptop, me with the newspaper. Vaughn corrected Marlo 3 times in the space of an hour. Once when she mentioned a restaurant where she said they had eaten on their anniversary, and he said no, that was a different occasion, she was mixing it up again. Once when she told me about a conversation she'd had with a colleague, and he interrupted to say she was leaving out the part that made it make sense. Once when she used the word renovated to describe something the neighbors had done to their house, and he said the correct word was remodeled. They were different things, and she should know that, given her profession. Each time Marlo said, "You're right, sorry," before I had even fully processed what had just been corrected. The apology came too fast, too automatic. The reflex of someone who had been wrong enough times in front of this man that sorry had become the path of least resistance. I turned a page of the newspaper that I had stopped reading 20 minutes ago. Then, just before 4 o'clock, Vaughn brought out the folder. It was a thick one, cream-colored with a small printed label on the front that read, "Hale Investment Restructuring Q4. He set it on the coffee table in front of Marlo with the ease of someone producing something that had already been discussed and agreed upon. "I need you to sign off on a few of these before the end of the week," he said. "Just the restructuring documents. It's straightforward, we talked about it last month, remember?" Marlo reached for the folder. Her fingers found the cover tab and started to lift it open. "What is it you're signing, sweetheart?" My voice came out quietly the way I used to speak on job sites when I wanted to slow something down without stopping it entirely. Both of them looked at me. Marlo's hand paused on the folder. "Just some investment documents, Dad. Vaughn's been restructuring our portfolio for—" "I'd love to take a look," I said, reaching my hand across the coffee table with a smile that I kept entirely relaxed. Old habit, 30 years of reading documents, I can't help myself. Something happened in Vaughn's face, not anger, not panic, but a very rapid, very controlled recalibration. He picked up the folder from the table before my hand reached it smoothly. The way you pocket your phone when someone asks to see a photograph you have decided they should not see. "You know what? It's not urgent," he said, tucking it under his arm with a smile that did not quite reach the corners of his eyes. "I'll get it to the accountant directly. No need to bore you with the paperwork, Silas." "No bother at all," I said pleasantly. "Another time," Vaughn said. That night I sat at the desk in my room and opened my notebook to a new page. I I wrote down everything I had read on Marlowe's list of questions 18 months ago. Every number, every acronym, every amount from memory, because I had spent 30 years training myself to retain what I read. Then I wrote the date and the time, and the words, HBP. What is HBP below that I wrote one more line. She was going to sign without reading it. I closed the notebook and looked out the window at the fence running dark and solid along the property line. Somewhere on the other side of it, Orson Bellamy was in his house, doing whatever a man does alone at night when he is watching and waiting for something he has been watching and waiting for a long time. For the first time since I had arrived, I thought I understood something about why he was there. The first time it happened, I assumed I had made a mistake. My car keys a plain metal ring with a worn leather tag that Carol had given me. The year we bought the Ford were not on the hook by the back door where I always left them. I checked the hook twice, then checked my jacket pockets, then the kitchen counter, then the basket on the hall table where Marlowe kept loose change and old receipts. Nothing. I found them 40 minutes later in the second drawer of the kitchen, tucked under a folded dish towel. I stood there with the keys in my hand and tried to reconstruct my movements from the night before. I had come in through the back door. I was almost certain of it, the same way I had come in every evening since moving here. Keys on the hook, shoes on the mat, jacket on the peg. I had been doing some version of that routine for 40 years. I did not leave keys in kitchen drawers under dish towels, but I was 65 years old, newly moved, sleeping in an unfamiliar room. I told myself it was the disruption. I put the keys in my jacket pocket and went to make coffee and said nothing about it to anyone. 3 days later, my reading glasses disappeared from the nightstand. I found them on the kitchen windowsill above the sink, folded neatly as though someone had set them there deliberately. I had not been in that part of the kitchen that morning. I knew that with certainty because I had eaten my oatmeal at the table and gone directly back to my room to read. I sat down on the edge of my bed and held the glasses in both hands and felt something cold move through my chest. Not fear exactly, but the specific discomfort of a man who has spent his career identifying anomalies and is now looking at one in his own life. That afternoon, Vaughn worked from home. I was reading in the living room when I heard him on a phone call in the kitchen. His voice pitched at the particular volume that is not quite private but not quite intended to be heard. Either the volume of a man who wants his words to carry without seeming to want that. "I'm just a little worried about him, babe," Vaughn was saying. "It's nothing serious, he just seems a little scattered. The keys this morning and yesterday, he couldn't remember whether he'd taken his blood pressure medication, so he took it twice. It's probably just the adjustment." A pause. I know you love him. I just think we should keep an eye on things." I turned a page of my book that I had stopped reading. He was not wrong about the keys. He was not wrong about the medication I had genuinely lost track that one morning, though I had caught myself before taking a second dose. But the way he packaged those two things together, dropping them into a phone call with Marlowe in a voice designed to reach me, had nothing to do with concern. It was the beginning of a story. He was writing the first chapter of it, now making sure Marlowe heard it before I had a chance to tell her anything else. I understood the technique because I had seen it used on job sites. When a contractor wants to discredit an inspector's findings, the first move is never to argue with the findings. It is to establish quietly and early that the inspector is not entirely reliable. Get that idea into the room before the report arrives, and the report never lands with full weight. Vaughn was establishing that idea about me. I was scattered. I was adjusting. I was a 65-year-old man who took his blood pressure medication twice and couldn't find his keys. That evening, Marlowe came home and touched my arm at the dinner table with a gentleness that had not been there before, the careful gentleness of someone who has been told to be careful. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked. "Really?" "I feel fine," I said, and I smiled at her in a way that I hoped conveyed that I meant it. "Better than I have in a long time, honestly." She nodded, but her eyes moved to Vaughn for just a fraction of a second. A checking motion, the way you glance at someone who has briefed you before a meeting to see if you are getting it right. After dinner, she sat on the back porch with her phone while Vaughn cleaned up inside. I brought her a cup of tea and sat down in the other chair, and we watched the garden go dark in the evening light. It was the first time we had been alone together, without a task attached to it, since I had arrived. "Have you talked to Nadia lately?" I asked. "Not really," she said. "We've been kind of growing apart. She said it the way you say something you have rehearsed, not because it is a lie exactly, but because it is someone else's conclusion that you have been repeating until it started to feel like your own." Vaughn thinks she creates a lot of drama. And honestly, when I look at it objectively, I think he's right. She's exhausting. I always liked Nadia, I said mildly. You only met her twice, Dad. That she called you every week for 12 years, I said. People who call every week for 12 years don't usually do it because they're exhausting. They do it because they love you. Marlo looked down at her phone in her lap. Her jaw tightened slightly, and I watched her work through something, push it down, cover it over, smooth it flat. When she looked up again, her expression was pleasant and closed, the way a window looks pleasant and closed when someone has locked it from the inside. It's complicated, she said. You don't have all the context. You're right, I said. I'm sorry. Tell me about the project you're working on, the one in Silver Lake. And she did, and her whole face changed when she talked about it. The plans, the client, the argument she was having with the structural team about the load-bearing wall on the second floor. She talked with her hands the way she had always done, the way Carol used to say she got from me, and for 20 minutes she was entirely, completely herself. That was the hardest part of that evening. Not what Vaughn had done, not the keys or the glasses or the carefully audible phone call. The hardest part was sitting next to my daughter and watching her be fully herself for 20 minutes, and knowing that 20 minutes was becoming the exception rather than the rule. When I went back inside, Vaughn was wiping down the kitchen counter. He looked up and gave me the easy open smile that I had been studying for 2 weeks now. Good talk, he asked. Always, I said. I went to my room and wrote 3 things in my notebook. The date, the time, and this. She apologized for missing Nadia before she admitted she missed her. Then I turned off the light and lay in the dark and thought about the morning, when I would look out the window and see Vaughn's car back out of the driveway and carry him away from this house for 8 hours, and whether there was a way to use those 8 hours that I had not yet thought of. I saw it from the kitchen window on a Tuesday morning, and it stopped me cold. Vaughn was crossing the yard toward the gate in the fence, the one I had not noticed until then. A narrow door fitted so flush with the boards that it was almost invisible unless you knew to look. He was carrying a bottle of whiskey. Not a paper bag from a liquor store, not something wrapped for a gift, just a bottle held at his side with the casual ease of a man delivering something expected. The label caught the morning sun as he pushed through the gate and disappeared into Orson's yard. I set down my coffee cup. He had been gone for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the microwave the entire time, standing at the kitchen window, with my hands wrapped around a mug that went cold while I waited. When he came back through the gate, his expression was relaxed and open, the easy look of a man who had just handled something cleanly. He found me in the kitchen and poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, as though nothing of particular significance had occurred. Went next door, he said, without being asked. Figured it was time to extend an olive branch. Life's too short to have bad blood with a neighbor, even one like him. I looked at him over the rim of my mug. How did he take it? Vaughn shrugged with one shoulder. He was polite, didn't say much, but he took the bottle. He smiled the clean, uncomplicated smile of a man pleased with his own reasonableness. Sometimes that's enough. That evening, Marlo told me about it, the way you tell someone a story that has already made you proud. She was at the kitchen counter chopping vegetables, her back half turned to me, and there was a warmth in her voice that I had not heard directed at Vaughn since I arrived. He just walked over there, she said. No warning, no big production. Just here, let's start over. That's who he is, Dad. People forget that about him. She set down the knife and turned to look at me, and her eyes were bright in a way that made my chest ache. He didn't have to do that. Orson's been awful to us, but Vaughn just decided to be the bigger person. That's something, I said, because it was true in its way. I did not tell her what I had been turning over in my mind since that morning. I did not tell her that, in 30 years of structural engineering, I had never once seen a man build a 10-foot fence and then voluntarily walk through it with a bottle of good whiskey, unless something had changed, unless the man on the other side of that fence had become less of a nuisance and more of a threat that needed managing from close range. Something had changed. I did not yet know what. The following week, I noticed that Orson was not coming outside in the mornings anymore. I had seen signs before the whiskey visit, the careful way he moved the slight tremor in his hands that morning at the fence that told me the man had already been fighting something for a while. But whatever had been slow before now moved faster. For the 3 weeks since I had moved in, his presence on his side of the fence had been as regular as the sunrise, the soft sounds of movement in his yard, occasionally a glimpse of his canvas jacket through the gap in the boards, once the smell of coffee drifting over in the early air. I had come to expect it the way you come to expect the particular sounds of a house without deciding to. Now, the yard next door was quiet in the mornings. Too quiet. On a Thursday, I caught a glimpse of him through the gap, just a few seconds enough to register that he had lost weight. His canvas jacket hung differently on his shoulders, the collar looser than it had been. He was moving toward his back door with the careful, measured steps of a man who was managing pain and did not want anyone to see him doing it. He reached the door handle, and his hand shook as he gripped it, a visible tremor, not the minor unsteadiness of cold fingers, but something deeper, something that lived in the muscles themselves. He got inside and pulled the door shut behind him. I stood at the gap in the fence for a moment longer than I should have. My hands pressed flat against the boards on either side of me, and I felt the wood solid and unyielding under my palms, and I thought about the last time I had seen a structure that looked stable from the outside, while something was failing at its core. On a Saturday morning, 12 days after Vaughn's visit with the whiskey, I was eating breakfast when I heard the ambulance. The siren came from 2 blocks away and grew until it was directly outside, and then it stopped. Through the kitchen window, I watched 2 paramedics come through Orson's front gate, with a gurney moving quickly, but not running the pace of people responding to something serious, but not yet critical. A neighbor from across the street stood on her porch with her arms crossed watching. Marlo came downstairs at the sound of voices and stood beside me at the window. Her hand found my arm. Is that from next door?" she asked. "I think so," I said. We stood there together, my daughter's fingers tight on my forearm, and watched them bring Orson out. He was conscious. I could see him moving slightly on the gurney, one hand raised toward his face in a gesture that might have been trying to say something to the paramedics. They loaded him into the ambulance with the efficiency of people who had done this 10,000 times, and then the doors closed, and the siren started again, and the street went quiet. Marlo exhaled slowly. "I hope he's okay," she said, and I believed that she meant it. Vaughn came in from the living room, drawn by the siren. He looked out the window at the ambulance pulling away and said nothing for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee from the counter and said, "Finally, some peace around here," and took a sip. Marlo looked at him. Something crossed her face, a flicker of something uncertain, something not quite comfortable, and then it was gone, smoothed over before it had a chance to become a question. I watched her smooth it over. I watched her decide not to ask. I turned back to the window and watched the ambulance turn the corner at the end of the block and disappear, and I felt something settle into place in my chest that was not quite grief and not quite anger, but was made up of elements of both the particular weight of a man who has spotted a failing structure and knows that he has not spotted it soon enough. 3 days later, I found the small notice tucked into the neighborhood message board at the corner mailbox cluster, printed on white paper, folded once. Orson James Bellamy, passed away Tuesday at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. A private service will be held Friday morning. I read it twice. Then I took it off the board and put it in my jacket pocket and walked back to the house. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook and wrote 4 words at the top of a new page underlined twice. Friday, I am going. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, what Orson left behind, for a man he had only spoken to twice, I need to know if you're still with me. Drop the number 7 in the comments right now. Just that. It tells me you're here, and it means more than you know. This is Revenge Dad, and what comes next will change everything you thought you understood about the man behind that fence. Please note, this story contains fictional elements woven in for depth and storytelling. Some details may not reflect any single experience. If this kind of content isn't for you, it's okay to step away now. I told Marlo I was going for a drive. It was not entirely untrue. The funeral home was in East LA 40 minutes from Los Feliz, and I drove the whole way with the windows down and the radio off, which is what I do when I am working something out. Carol used to say I think better when I can hear the road. She was right about most things. I found parking half a block from the funeral home and sat in the truck for a moment before going in. The building was a modest one, beige stucco, a small awning over the entrance, a sign in the window with Orson's name printed in the plain block letters that funeral homes use when they are not trying to dress anything up. There were 4 other cars in the parking lot. One of them had a Hertz sticker on the bumper. I went inside. The room held maybe 40 chairs arranged in 8 rows. 37 of them were empty. A man and a woman I did not recognize sat together near the back neighbors, maybe, or a distant acquaintance who had seen the notice somewhere. An older woman in a gray cardigan sat alone near the window, with a rosary in her hands, her lips moving slightly. and in the front row alone sat a man who had his father's shoulders. He was around 40 built, like someone who had played a contact sport in college and never entirely stopped. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie. His hair was the same close-cut, white-going gray that Orson's had been worn the same way, and when he turned his head slightly, I could see the same strong jaw, the same quality of alertness in his face, that particular attention that Orson had carried like a tool he never put down. His eyes were red at the edges. The rest of him was rock. The service was short. A minister who had clearly not known Orson personally read from Psalms and said the things ministers say when they are working from a file rather than a memory. Nobody spoke. The older woman with the rosary wept quietly into a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking in small, contained movements. The man in the front row sat with his hands folded in his lap and his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on the casket with the expression of someone who has been angry for so long that grief has had to find a way to exist alongside it. When it was over, the two people at the back left quickly. The older woman took her time, stopping to press her hand briefly against the casket before she went. And then it was just the two of us in the room, and the man in the front row turned and looked at me with an expression that was not quite hostile and not quite welcoming. Later, he told me his father had described me to him, what I looked like, what I drove, that I would come alone. He hadn't been watching the door since it opened. He stood up. He was taller than I expected, taller than Orson had been, or maybe just carrying himself differently with the straight-backed posture of someone who uses his height deliberately. "You're the neighbor," he said. His voice was lower than Orson's, rougher at the edges. "The father-in-law." It was not a question. I walked up the aisle and stopped a few feet from him. Up close, his eyes were dark brown, the same color as Orson's had been, and they were reading me the way Orson's eyes had read me through the gap in the fence rapidly, thoroughly, without giving anything away in the process. "Silas Whitmore," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. His jaw worked slightly like he was chewing on a decision. Then he reached inside his suit jacket and took out an envelope. It was a standard business envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a strip of red wax that had been pressed with something, a coin maybe, or a ring. My name was written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Block letters, careful and deliberate, the writing of a man who wanted to be clearly understood. "My father left instructions," the man said. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the effort in it, the particular strain of someone holding something together through will, rather than ease. He said if he died before he had a chance to speak to you directly, I was to give you this, in person, at the service. He paused. Those were his exact words, in person, at the service. "Who are you?" I asked, though I already half knew. "Callum Bellamy," he said, "his son." I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected for its size, something inside it beyond just paper. I held it in both hands and looked at my name, written in Orson's careful block letters, and my throat tightened in a way I had not anticipated. "He knew I'd come," I said. It was not really a question. "He believed you would," Callum said, and something in the way he said it told me that he himself had not been entirely certain. I broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph and a small key. The key was old-fashioned brass, colored the kind that opens a padlock or a small lockbox. The photograph was 4 inches by 6, printed on standard photo paper, the image slightly faded at the edges, the way photographs get when they have been handled many times. It showed a man I recognized, younger, maybe 15 years younger, but unmistakably Von Hale, standing on what appeared to be a restaurant patio in summer. His arm was around the shoulders of a young woman. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back slightly, her dark hair catching the light. She was beautiful. She looked happy in the particular open way of someone who believes they are safe. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in the same careful block, letters as my name on the envelope, Orson had written 2 lines. "Ilara Bellamy. My daughter died trusting the man sleeping next to yours." The room had a sound system that was playing something soft and instrumental, the kind of music that is designed to fill silence without demanding attention. I became aware of it for the first time because everything else had gone very still. My hands were not shaking. I am not a man whose hands shake easily, but I felt the photograph between my fingers with a clarity that was almost painful, the slight texture of the paper, the weight of the key resting against my palm, and I understood, in the way you understand something that rearranges the furniture of everything you thought you knew, that the crack I had been watching in the foundation of my daughter's life was not a hairline fracture. It went all the way down. I sat down in the nearest chair because standing required more of me than I had available at that precise moment. Not because my legs gave out, they did not, but because a man who has just understood something that large owes himself a moment to let it settle before he decides what to do next. Callum Bellamy stood in front of me. His arms were at his sides and his chin was up, and his red-rimmed eyes were watching me with an expression I could not immediately read. "I don't know who you are, Mr. Whitmore," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word before he pulled it back under control. "And right now, I'm not sure I trust you." I looked up at him. I looked at the photograph in my hand. I looked at the small brass key sitting in my palm. "That's fair," I said. "I'm not sure you should." Callum Bellamy drove a dark gray sedan, practical and clean, the kind of car a man chooses when he has stopped caring about what his car says about him. He unlocked it without asking whether I wanted to talk, and I got in the passenger side without being asked, because we both understood that the conversation was not finished, and the funeral home was not the right place to finish it. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. His hands were on his thighs. Not the wheel deliberate, I thought, like a man keeping himself from gripping something too hard. "How long have you been living there?" he asked. 5 weeks, I said. He nodded slowly. "And in 5 weeks, what did you see?" I had spent 30 years answering questions about structures. The discipline of it had taught me that the most useful answer is never the most complete one. It is the most precise one. So I told him exactly what I had seen. In the order, I had seen it without interpretation or conclusion. The fence, the keys in the kitchen drawer, the glasses on the windowsill, the folder Vaughn had produced and then removed before I could read it, the phone call designed to carry through the wall, the list of questions in Marlowe's handwriting from 18 months ago with HBP written in the margin and the last line pressed lighter than the rest. Callum listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened once when I mentioned the folder, and again when I described the phone call. Otherwise, his face was controlled in the particular way of someone who has been managing his own reactions for a long time and has gotten very good at it. When I finished, he turned and looked at me directly. His dark eyes were steady and measuring. "You've been in that house for 5 weeks," he said, "living under the same roof as Vaughn Hale. And you're telling me you turned down his offer to manage your money in the first week." "I did," I said. "Do you have anything that shows that?" I reached into my jacket pocket and took out my wallet. Behind my driver's license, where I keep the things I need to find quickly, was a folded piece of paper, the written refusal I had drafted that first afternoon, signed and dated the week I arrived. I unfolded it and held it out. Callum took it. He read it once quickly. Then he read it again more slowly. He refolded it along the original creases and held it out for me to take back, and when I took it, his hand was not entirely steady. "My father watched you for 5 weeks, Callum said, and his voice had lost some of its hardness. Not all of it, but enough that I could hear what was underneath. "He wrote about you. He said you asked about Marlowe, not about Vaughn. He said you listened without interrupting." He stopped, swallowed. "He said that told him everything." I put the paper back behind my license. Why didn't he come to me sooner? Because he needed to be sure. Callum looked out the windshield at the empty parking lot. He'd been wrong before, about who to trust, about how much time he had. His hands moved to the steering wheel, now wrapping around it at 10 and 2. He was running out of time, and he knew it. He just didn't know how fast. "Tell me about Alara," I said. Callum was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone who does not want to answer, but the quiet of someone deciding where to begin a story they have told themselves so many times it has worn grooves in them. "She was my older sister," he said. "Smarter than me, funnier. She could read a room the way some people read a book instantly, completely. She trusted Vaughn because he was the kind of man who knows how to be trusted by people like her." He paused. "He met her 6 years before he met Marlowe. He built it slowly, the relationship, the financial entanglement, all of it. By the time she realized what was happening, her money was in an entity he controlled, and her confidence in her own judgment was in pieces." "HBP," I said. Callum looked at me sharply. "What?" "Marlowe's list of questions from 18 months ago. She wrote HBP in the margin next to a transfer of $12,500. I watched his face. "That meant something to you just now." His jaw tightened again, harder this time. "Halcyon Bridge Partners. That's what my father spent 2 years trying to confirm. It's the entity Vaughn used with Alara. He couldn't prove it was still active because he didn't know where to look. He turned to face me fully now, and the hardness was back in his eyes, but mixed with something else, something that looked cautiously like the beginning of reassessment. You read that from a piece of paper you found 5 weeks ago, and you remembered it exactly. I remember everything I read, I said. Occupational habit. Ilara died 4 years ago, Callum said. The words came out flat and separate, the way you say things that you have said so many times they no longer surprise you with their weight. The official finding was that she took her own life. My father never accepted that. Not because he was in denial. He was a private detective for 22 years. He understood what the evidence showed. He didn't accept it because he knew Vaughn had spent months before her death systematically destroying her ability to trust herself. And he believed he could not prove, but he believed that a person who had been that thoroughly dismantled does not get there alone. The instrumental music from inside the funeral home was faintly audible through the closed car doors. Something in a minor key, unremarkable, just sound filling space. Why didn't your father go to the police? I asked. He did. 3 times. Callum's voice went flat in a different way now, the flatness of an old wound. Without evidence of direct causation, there was nothing to charge. Vaughn was careful. He always is. He looked back out the windshield. So, my father spent 2 years building a case from the outside. He found some of it. Not all of it. He rented the house next door because he believed the rest of it was still there, in Vaughn's pattern, in his current behavior, in whatever he was doing to the next woman he had chosen. Marlowe, I said. Marlowe, Callum said. I sat with that for a moment, letting it find its proper place. Outside, a woman walked past the parking lot, pushing a stroller, talking on her phone, entirely unaware that the air around her was carrying any particular weight. There's more, Callum said. My father divided what he had into 3 parts. He believed Vaughn would find a way into his house eventually, and he did. A neighbor's security camera caught him going in one night while my father was in the hospital. He took files, destroyed some paper documents. Callum reached into his jacket and produced a folded piece of paper, a printed photograph, a time stamp visible in the corner, a figure in dark clothing going through the side door. The build was Vaughn's. The timestamp was 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday. But my father had already moved the most important materials. The lawyers have one portion. I have another. He looked at the key in my hand. And the 3rd portion is wherever that opens. I looked down at the small brass key. Where does it go? Downtown, Callum said. My father's old attorney kept an office on the 12th floor of a building on Figueroa. There's a safety deposit box in the wall of the conference room. That key has opened it for 30 years. He started the engine. I can take you there now, or I can take you back to your truck, and you can decide whether this is something you want to be involved in. I thought about Marlowe on the back porch, her hands wrapped around a mug, her voice going carefully neutral when I asked about Nadia. I thought about the folder Vaughn had smoothly removed before I could read it. I thought about the list of questions with the last line pressed lighter than the rest, as though she had already been losing faith in her right to ask them when she wrote it. I didn't drive 40 minutes to a funeral home for a man I barely knew. I said to decide I didn't want to be involved. Callum pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the freeway. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes, and the silence was not the silence of people who have nothing to say. It was the silence of 2 people who have just agreed to something that cannot be undone and are taking a moment to understand what that means. I held the brass key in my closed fist and felt it warm against my palm, and I thought about Orson Bellamy standing alone at a fence for 8 months, watching and waiting, leaving careful instructions for a man he had only spoken to twice. He asked about Marlowe, not about Vaughn. That told me everything. I hoped he had been right about me. The building on Figueroa was the kind that downtown Los Angeles builds, in between its ambitions 20 stories of glass and concrete from the late 80s. Not ugly exactly, but carrying its age the way things do, when nobody has paid them much attention in a while. The lobby had a security desk, a directory board with half the names outdated, and an elevator that took slightly longer than it should. The 12th floor smelled like old paper and central air conditioning. Callum led me down a corridor of frosted glass doors to one at the far end that read, Hendricks and Associates Attorney at Law, in gold lettering that had been there long enough to fade at the edges. He knocked twice, opened the door without waiting, and a woman at the front desk looked up with the recognition of someone who had been expecting this visit. Callum had called ahead from the car outside the funeral home. I had not heard the call, but the laptop already open on the conference table told me he had. "Mr. Bellamy," she said, "I'm so sorry about your father." "Thank you, Louise," Callum said, and his voice was gentler than I had heard it yet. "We need the conference room." The conference room was small, a round table, 6 chairs, a window that looked out over the southbound lanes of the 110. Along the interior wall between 2 frame prints of California coastal landscapes was a section of paneling that looked exactly like the rest of the wall, until Callum pressed his palm flat against it and a small door swung inward on a concealed hinge. Behind it was a section of wall with 3 fireproof lockboxes recessed into it, each one with a keyhole and a number stamped above it. The number above the middle box was 37. I took the brass key from my jacket pocket and fitted it into the lock. It turned on the first try, smoothly the way a well-made thing works when it has been maintained. The box slid out and I set it on the conference table and opened it. Inside was a leather journal, its cover worn soft with handling, a manila envelope sealed with tape, a USB drive small and black with a strip of white tape on the side and a date written in marker 3 years ago, and a folded sheet of paper with my name on it in the same block letters as the envelope at the funeral home. Callum reached past me and picked up the USB drive. His hands were steadier than they had been in the parking lot. He carried the drive to the laptop that Louise had set up on the table. She had known exactly what would be needed, I noticed, and plugged it in. A single audio file, 47 minutes long. He played 30 seconds of it and then stopped. His face had gone the particular gray of someone who has just heard a voice they were not prepared to hear. He pressed his knuckles against his mouth for a moment, hard, then lowered his hand and straightened his shoulders. "That's Alara," he said. The recording was not high quality. The ambient sound suggested a phone propped somewhere in a room, capturing a conversation indirectly. Alara's voice was clear enough. She was talking about money, about a transfer, about something she had been told and was starting to doubt. And then, near the end of the 30 seconds Callum had played, she mentioned a name. Not a person's name. A string of letters, 4 of them run together, the way people abbreviate things when they are writing notes to themselves or talking about something they have discussed so many times they have stopped using its full form. Callum stopped the recording and looked at me. She mentioned that same abbreviation in 2 other recordings my father found. And in a note she left, not the one the police found, a different one written months before she died. He spent 2 years trying to find a person with those initials. His jaw was tight. He couldn't. Nobody matched. Nobody he could connect to Vaughn with any documentation. I was looking out the window at the 110, watching the southbound traffic move in the afternoon light. The abbreviation was sitting in my memory from Marlowe's handwriting 18 months ago, and from Callum's voice just now, and from the USB drive sitting on the table, and something was assembling itself in the part of my mind where 30 years of reading project files lived. "Say it again," I said. Callum said it. I closed my eyes for 3 seconds. In 3 decades of structural engineering, I had reviewed contracts for projects in 9 states. Delaware entity filings had their own abbreviation, conventions shorter than most designed for speed. The kind of shorthand that becomes invisible once you know the pattern. "That's not a person," I said. I opened my eyes and looked at Callum directly. "That's not initials. That's an entity name. The way Delaware LLCs get shortened in internal documents when people are talking about them every day." I pulled Louise's laptop toward me and opened a browser window. "May I?" Callum nodded. I went to the California Secretary of State's Business Search Portal, the public-facing records database where every foreign LLC doing business in California is required to register with its registered agent listed by name. The search took 11 seconds. Halcyon Bridge Partners LLC, Foreign Limited Liability Company, State of Formation, Delaware. Date registered in California 6 years and 4 months ago. Status active. Registered agent in California, Vaughn Hale. I turned the laptop so Callum could see the screen. He leaned forward with both hands flat on the table and read the entry once. Then he read it again. The color had left his face entirely, and what was underneath was something rawer than anger, the specific expression of a man who has been searching for a single piece of information for 2 years and has just found it sitting in a public database that anyone with an internet connection could have accessed. 2 years, he said. and his voice came out rough and torn at the edges, not at all the controlled instrument it had been. My father spent 2 years looking for this. He pushed back from the table and turned away toward the window, one hand pressed against the back of his neck. His shoulders were shaking slightly, not much, but enough. 2 years, and it was just sitting there. It's only visible if you know what you're looking for, I said quietly. Your father was looking for a person. The abbreviation doesn't look like an entity name unless you've read a few hundred Delaware filings. Callum stood at the window for a long moment. Outside, the afternoon light was shifting toward the gold of early evening, washing the southbound lanes of the 110 in something that looked almost warm. When he turned back, his eyes were red again, but his voice had steadied. There's more in that journal, he said. And the envelope. My father documented Vaughn's movements, his meetings, the vehicles he tracked. He built a profile. But he told me the piece he was missing. The financial link, the entity, was the thing that would make everything else hold together. He looked at the laptop screen. He died 3 days before we found it. I looked down at the leather journal on the table. I thought about Orson standing at the fence with his canvas jacket and his careful eyes and his 2 decades of detective work, looking through a 1/4-inch gap at a man who had done this before and was doing it again. I picked up the journal and opened it to the last entry. Orson's handwriting was the same careful block print as the envelope as the back of the photograph. Deliberate, precise, the writing of a man who wanted every word to count. The last entry was dated 11 days before he died. Found Dr. Silver Lake. She's the link. She got out, but she has everything. Vaughn doesn't know she still has it. Dr. 2 initials this time. An actual person. I looked up at Callum. Who is Dr.? Callum opened the manila envelope. Inside was a single index card with a name, a street in Silver Lake, and a phone number written in Orson's hand. The one who got away, Callum said. Silver Lake was 20 minutes from Figueroa on a good night, and that Friday it was a good night. The freeway moving the city lit up on both sides, the kind of Los Angeles evening that makes you understand why people come here and stay even when they know better. The house was a 1950s bungalow on a narrow street that climbed the hill above the reservoir. Small yard, a lemon tree by the front gate, a porch light burning yellow in the dark. The light in the front room was on behind closed curtains. Callum had called ahead from the car 3 words. We're coming tonight. Whatever was said in response, he had not shared it with me. We knocked at 8:47. The woman who opened the door was around 45, with the kind of face that had been striking once and was more interesting now. Angular, watchful, carrying the particular wariness of someone who has learned through experience that surprises are rarely good ones. Her hair was dark cut short, and she was still dressed from work in slacks and a button-down shirt, with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. She held a glass of water in one hand, and she looked at Callum first, then at me, then back at Callum. You have his eyes, she said. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles around the glass had gone white. Diana, Callum said. This is Silas Whitmore. He's Marlowe Hale's father. Something moved across Diana Reeves's face, a rapid, complicated sequence of emotions that she did not fully manage to contain. Grief was in it, and recognition, and something that looked like the particular pain of a wound that had been doing well until someone pressed on it. She stepped back from the door. Come in, she said. The kitchen was clean and orderly, the kitchen of someone who lived alone and had made their peace with it. A row of plants along the windowsill above the sink, all of them thriving. A stack of folders on the corner of the tablework brought home. She set her water glass down and did not pick it up again, and her hands found each other on the tabletop and held on. When did he pass? She asked. Tuesday, Callum said. At Cedars. Diana pressed her lips together and nodded once slowly. The nod of someone absorbing something they had been preparing for, but that still landed hard. Her eyes went bright for a moment, the specific brightness that precedes tears, and then she blinked it back with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had decided some time ago that she was done being undone by this particular subject. He called me 3 weeks ago, she said. He told me he was sick. He said he had set things in motion and that someone would come. She looked at me directly for the first time. He described you, Mr. Whitmore, more or less. What did he say? I asked. He said you were an engineer, that you asked the right questions, that you had the right reasons for being there. She picked up her water glass, realized she didn't want it, set it back down. He said he trusted you, which from Orson meant something specific. He didn't trust easily. He had reason not to, Callum said, and his voice had gone tight again. Diana looked at him. "How are you doing, Callum?" "I'm working on it," he said, which was clearly the most honest thing he was willing to say. She nodded and stood up. From the cabinet above the refrigerator, she brought down a metal box, the kind with a small combination lock, the kind you buy at an office supply store when you have something you want to keep, but cannot justify a proper safe. She set it on the table, dialed the combination with the ease of someone who has done it many times, and opened it. Inside was a manila folder, thick with papers, and on top of it a phone in a clear plastic bag. 3 years ago, Diana said. Sitting back down, Vaughn Hale came into my life through a mutual acquaintance at a real estate investment seminar in Burbank. He was charming. He knew the right things to say and the right time to say them. She said this without emotion, the way you describe weather. Over about 8 months, he built something between us that felt like a partnership, professional, first, then personal. He talked about Halcyon Bridge. He made it sound like an opportunity. He was very good at making things sound like opportunities. "When did you start to doubt it?" I asked. "Month 9, she said. I had a contract in front of me. He wanted me to sign over control of a portion of my assets into the Halcyon Bridge structure. He said it was standard that all his investors did it this way, that it was just the legal mechanism that I could exit any time." She looked down at the folder on the table. "I'm an accountant, Mr. Whitmore. I've spent 20 years reading contracts. I told him I wanted my own attorney to review it first." She paused. "He was fine with that. Very calm, very reasonable. But that night I went home and I pulled out everything I had, every email, every text, every document he'd sent me, and I laid it all on my kitchen table, and I looked at it the way I look at client's books when I think something isn't adding up." And Callum said, "And none of it added up," Diana said flatly. "The entity structure was designed to be opaque. Money going in had clear documentation. Money coming out did not. The exit provisions were written in language that sounded simple but contained conditions that would have made it almost impossible to recover assets once transferred." She touched the folder without opening it. "I also found out through a friend of the mutual acquaintance who introduced us that Vaughn was married. He had never mentioned a wife." She said the last sentence without particular bitterness, which was more affecting than bitterness would have been. "I ended it," she said. "I told him I had decided not to invest and that I didn't want further contact. He was very gracious about it. That was the part that frightened me most, actually, how gracious he was. Like, he was simply moving to the next item on a list." She opened the folder now and turned it so we could see. "I kept everything. Every email, every text message, the unsigned contract, and a recording of one phone call made on my own phone in my own home without his knowledge." She looked at me. "I know California requires all parties to consent to a recording. I'm not planning to use it in court." "Oh, two-party consent," I said. "The emails and texts are what matter." "Exactly," she said. "Every email, every text is admissible, and the contract structure is documented." She pulled out a single page from near the back of the folder and slid it across the table to me. "Orson came to me 2 months ago. He showed me what he had on Vaughn's history with his daughter. He asked me to be a witness if it ever came to that." Her voice tightened slightly. "I told him yes. I should have said yes 3 years ago to someone, anyone. I didn't because I hadn't lost anything. I got out before the contract was signed, so technically nothing happened to me. I kept telling myself it wasn't my story to tell." She stopped. Her jaw tightened, and she pressed her fingers against the table surface hard, leaving small, white pressure marks on the wood. "Then Orson showed me the photograph of Alara," she said, and her voice cracked open on the last word, just slightly just at the edge, before she pulled it back. "And I understood that the story I had decided wasn't mine to tell had been told to someone else instead. Someone who didn't get out." The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic climbing the hill outside. One of the plants on the windowsill had dropped a leaf onto the sill below it, and I found myself looking at it, small, curved, still green. I reached into my jacket and took out my phone. I pulled up the photograph I had taken of the cover page of the investment folder Vaughn had produced and then removed in the living room 6 weeks ago, the one he had not let me read. I set the phone on the table beside Diana's single page. "Is this the same structure?" I asked. Diana looked at my phone, then at her page, then at my phone again. She picked up my phone and held it closer, and I watched the color leave her face the way color leaves a room when a cloud passes over the sun, gradually, completely, all at once. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Her voice had dropped to something barely above a murmur. "My son-in-law produced it in my daughter's living room 6 weeks ago," I said. He wanted her to sign it. I asked to see it and he took it back before I could read past the first page. I looked at her directly. I read fast. Diana set the phone down on the table. Her hands were trembling now, not violently but visibly a fine tremor that moved through her fingers and into the papers under them. She pressed both palms flat against the table to stop it. "Mr. Whitmore sees," she said, and her voice had gone very careful, very precise, the voice of an accountant reading numbers. "She does not want to be reading the contract he's pushing your daughter to sign. It's not just similar to what he showed me. The entity structure, the asset transfer mechanism, the exit provisions." She looked up at me, and her eyes were full of something that was grief and guilt and urgency all at once. "It's the same document. He didn't rewrite it. He just changed the names." I had known something like this was coming, since I had sat in Diana's kitchen and seen her pull out the folder. But knowing something is coming does not fully prepare you for the moment it arrives. I felt it in my sternum, a cold physical recognition, the sensation I had learned to associate over 30 years, with the moment when a flaw you have been tracking reveals its true extent. I thought about Marlo at the kitchen table, her hand reaching for the cover tab of that folder, her fingers starting to lift it open. She had been 2 seconds from signing it, maybe less. "How long has she been with him?" Diana asked. 6 years, I said. Diana closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet at the edges, but her voice was steady. "Then he's had 6 years to make sure she won't question it," she said. "That's not impatience, Mr. Whitmore. That's confidence. He's done this long enough to know exactly when someone is ready." She looked at Callum, then back at me. "Your daughter, does she know you're here?" "No," I said. Diana nodded slowly, the nod of someone calculating something important. "Then you need to move carefully," she said. "If he figures out what you know before you're ready, he'll accelerate. He'll get her to sign something, or he'll find another way to secure the assets before you can stop him." She closed the folder and looked at me directly, her hands still flat against the table, the tremor gone, now replaced by the steadiness of a woman who has made a decision. "Tell me what you need from me, and I'll give it to you. All of it. Everything I have." Callum dropped me at my truck outside the funeral home at 10 past 10. The parking lot was empty and the building was dark, and I sat behind the wheel for a few minutes without starting the engine. I had spent the drive back from Silver Lake not talking, which Callum had understood without being told. He was a man who knew when another man needed to think, which told me something about him that I filed away. I started the truck and drove home through streets that were still busy with Friday night people outside restaurants and bars living ordinary Friday night lives, and I thought about a single image the whole way back. Marlo's hand reaching for the cover tab of that folder, her fingers starting to lift it open. 2 seconds, maybe less. Diana's words were still sitting in my chest when I pulled into the driveway. He's had 6 years to make sure she won't question it. 6 years of small corrections at the dinner table. 6 years of, "You always mix up the details and you're too sensitive about this." 6 years of a woman learning to apologize before she finished forming the thought that might require one. The house was quiet when I came in. The kitchen light was on over the stove the way Marlo always left it when she went to bed. Before me she had done that, since she was a teenager, leaving a light on, so I would not come home to a dark house. That small habit still intact after everything hit me somewhere I had not expected. I stood in the kitchen for a moment and looked at that light. It was the kind of thing you do not notice until you understand what it means. A daughter who has been leaving lights on for her father since she was 16 years old, who has carried that instinct through everything, who still does it now, in a house where someone has spent 6 years teaching her that her instincts are wrong. I went to my room and sat at the desk and opened my notebook. I was not investigating what had happened to Alara anymore. That was real, and it mattered, and it would be addressed. But what was in front of me, what was happening right now in this house to my daughter, was something different. It was not a closed case. It was an active one. I wrote for 40 minutes. Everything I had observed since arriving, organized by date and time, with specific details. The exact words Vaughn had used, the exact amounts from Marlo's handwriting, the folder he had produced and removed, the phone call designed to carry through the wall. 22 pages of careful dated specific notes. The kind of documentation that a man writes when he understands that memory is not enough, and that what he is building needs to stand on its own. In 30 years of contract disputes and structural inspections, I had learned one thing about documentation that most people learn too late. The value of a written record is not in what it proves at the moment of writing. It is in what it demonstrates about the writer. A man who records the date, the time, the exact words in the ordinary course of his daily life. That man is not building a case. He is doing what he has always done. And that distinction in a courtroom or a mediation room or a judge's chambers is worth more than most people understand. When I finished, I sat back and looked at what I had written. It was a structure, and like every structure I had ever examined in 30 years, once you could see the whole of it, the flaw was unmistakable. Vaughn was not patient. He was strategic. And strategy has a timeline. He had been pushing the investment folder for weeks now, and the push was getting less subtle. He needed Marlowe's signature before something changed, before I asked the wrong question in the right company, or before Marlowe herself woke up enough to ask the one she had almost asked 18 months ago. The question I kept returning to was simpler than all of it. Not what Vaughn had done, not what could be proven, not what the attorneys would need. The question was this: what did Marlowe need to see, and in what order, and from whose mouth before she would be able to trust what she was seeing? Because that was the real problem, not the evidence. The evidence existed. Diana had it. Callum had it. I had 22 pages of it in my own handwriting. The real problem was that Vaughn had spent 6 years calibrating Marlowe's relationship with her own perception. He had not hidden the truth from her. He had done something more precise than that. He had taught her to doubt the act of looking. A woman who has been told often enough that she misremembers, that she is too sensitive, that she does not understand the details, that woman does not need more evidence. She needs to be in a room where the evidence is laid out by people she has not been told to distrust, where she can look at it without someone standing beside her, reframing what she sees before she has finished seeing it. That was what Diana's kitchen had shown me. Not the contracts, not the entity structure, not even the photograph of Vaughn and Alara on the restaurant patio. What Diana had shown me was that there was a room available, a room without Vaughn in it, where the truth could be placed on a table and left alone long enough for Marlowe to read it at her own pace and trust what she found. I needed to get her into that room. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Callum. I know what we need to do, but first I need to set a trap. Can you and your attorney be ready to move within a week? His reply came back in under a minute. She's been ready for 2 years. Tell me when. I set the phone down and looked at the window. Not at anything specific, just at the dark glass and the faint reflection of the desk lamp in it and the shape of my own face looking back at me from somewhere that felt like a long way off. The trap was not complicated. It did not need to be. Vaughn was strategic, which meant he responded to information the way a chess player responds to a piece moving on the board. He recalculated, repositioned, found the new angle. What I needed to do was give him a piece to respond to. Something that looked like an opening. I had already done the first part without planning it. The conversation about my will, about restructuring the trust, about wanting to understand what I was working with, I had started that without knowing exactly what I was building. But I had been building something. And I had watched Vaughn lean forward by a degree when I mentioned the Santa Monica sale proceeds, and I had written it down at the top of the following page. Now, I needed to give him one more step in the direction he was already moving. Something generous enough to be convincing, specific enough to be actionable, and timed precisely enough that when he moved on, the room Callum and his attorney had prepared would already be waiting. I thought about Carol, who had always said, I planned the way other people breathed automatically, constantly, without having to decide to do it. She had said it with affection and with the mild exasperation of a woman who sometimes wanted her husband to simply sit in a chair without redesigning it in his head. I had tried. I had never fully managed it. She would have known what to do about Marlowe. She would have known the exact right moment and the exact right words, the ones that open a door without forcing it. She had always understood our daughter in ways that I had to work toward. But she was not here, and the kitchen light was still on, and the notebook was full of 22 pages in my own handwriting, and that would have to be enough. I looked out the window toward the fence, the part of it still standing dark and solid in the backyard. On the other side of it, Orson's yard was quiet. His garden was still, but I felt his presence the way you feel the presence of a thing that has been carefully built in the structure it left behind, in the instructions it carried, in the key that had opened exactly what it was supposed to open, his words. Still exact. And tomorrow morning, when Vaughn's car backed out of the driveway and carried him away from this house for 8 hours, I was going to give him something worth watching back. I closed the notebook and turned off the desk lamp and sat in the dark for a moment before standing up. One more day of being the grateful father-in-law who was thinking about his will. One more morning of coffee at the kitchen table, an easy conversation, and the particular patience of a man who has spent 30 years waiting for structures to reveal their flaws on their own schedule. Then the room. Then Marlowe. I got up and turned off the kitchen light on my way back through the hall, leaving the house the way it had been before. I came in quiet and dark and waiting, and I thought that Orson Bellamy would have understood exactly what I was doing and why, and would not have needed it explained. That was enough. Marlowe left at 7:30 for a site visit in Glendale, her laptop bag over one shoulder, and a travel mug of coffee in her hand. She kissed me on the cheek at the kitchen door, the way she always had since she was small, quick, automatic, genuine, and then she was gone, and I heard her car back out of the driveway, and the quiet of a Saturday morning settle back into the house. Vaughn was still in the kitchen, finishing his coffee, scrolling through something on his phone with the unhurried ease of a man with nowhere to be. I poured myself a second cup and sat down across from him. "I've been thinking," I said, "about my will." Vaughn did not look up immediately. He finished whatever he was reading, set his phone face down on the table, a small gesture that I noted, and gave me his full attention with the warm, patient expression of a man who has learned that the best way to get what he wants is to make the other person feel heard. "Yeah," he said. "I had it set up through a trust after Carol passed," I said. "Attorney in Santa Monica, everything goes to Marlowe through the trust structure, which means probate fees the whole process." I shook my head slowly the way a man shakes his head when he has decided that something unnecessarily complicated needs to be simplified. "I'm thinking I should just restructure it, leave everything directly to Marlowe. Simpler, cleaner, faster when the time comes." Vaughn set his coffee mug down. It was a small movement, barely noticeable. But I had been watching this man for 6 weeks, and I knew what his hands looked like when he was relaxed, and what they looked like when something had caught his full attention. His fingers settled around the mug and stayed there. "That's a significant decision," he said. His voice was careful and warm, the voice of a man being very deliberate about his tone. "What made you start thinking about it?" "Getting older?" I said simply. "Marlowe's my only child. It should go to her, straightforward." "Absolutely," Vaughn said. He leaned forward slightly, both elbows on the table. "Have you thought about the tax implications? Depending on the structure, going direct versus through a trust can have real consequences. I know someone at a wealth management firm in Pasadena who handles exactly this kind of thing. He's good. I could get you a meeting." "I appreciate that," I said. "What I really need to understand first is what I'm working with. Liquid assets, the value of what came from these Santa Monica sale insurance policies." I paused as though thinking through it. "I haven't totaled it up in a while, honestly." What happened next was subtle enough that a man who was not watching for it would have missed it entirely. Vaughn's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, barely a degree, but the direction was unmistakable. He leaned in. "I could help you with that," he said. "If you want, we could sit down this weekend and just take stock, get everything organized. Marlowe would probably appreciate knowing it's been looked at properly." "That's kind of you," I said. From that morning forward, Vaughn became a different version of himself around me. Not dramatically, he was too controlled for that. But the calibration changed. He refilled my coffee without being asked. He asked about my knee, which I had mentioned hurting once in passing 3 weeks ago. At dinner that evening, he steered the conversation toward my years of engineering work, with what felt like genuine curiosity. And he listened well, asking follow-up questions at exactly the right moments. And he began to ask gently and gradually about specifics, which bank held my primary checking account, whether the Santa Monica sale proceeds were still liquid or had been reinvested, whether the life insurance policy Carol and I had taken out in the 90s was still active, and who the current beneficiary was. Each question came wrapped in context, concern, curiosity, helpfulness. Each one landed like a carefully placed instrument. I answered each one with the approximate truth, enough detail to seem genuine, vague enough to give him nothing he could act on immediately. And within an hour of each conversation, I went to my room and wrote down exactly what had been said, word for word, with the time and date at the top of the page. Not a recording. A contemporaneous written record, the kind that carries weight in civil proceedings, because it was created at the time in the ordinary course of events by a witness with no reason to fabricate. I had learned that in 30 years of contract disputes. It had never been more useful than it was now. On the third evening, Vaughn sat beside me on the back porch after dinner and looked out at the garden in the last of the light and said in the tone of a man sharing something personal, "You know, Silas, I think of you as more than just Marlowe's dad. I hope you know that. Your family. I looked at him, at the easy sincerity of his expression, at the way he held his glass, at the particular quality of his stillness. And I thought about a man who had spent the last year of his life standing at a fence with shaking hands watching this same face from the other side. "I know, Vaughn," I said. "I feel the same way." I went inside and added the exchange to my notes. Then my phone lit up on the desk. "Callum, a single line. Margaret filed the initial complaint this morning. Suarez at LAPD received our request to review Orson's case. We're ready when you are." I read the message twice. Then I typed back, "Not yet. One more day." I needed one more day because Marlo did not yet know what I knew, and I was not going to move against the man in her house until I was certain she would be safe when it happened. That was not caution. That was the difference between tearing down a structure and making sure the people inside it had somewhere to go first. I set the phone down and looked out the window. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow would be enough. The night before, I had left my phone on the kitchen counter while I went to refill my water. I had not thought anything of it. I thought nothing of it now either, until I heard Marlo's voice through the open bedroom door. I was in the hallway when I heard it. Not eavesdropping. I want to be clear about that, because the distinction mattered to me even then. I had come out of my room to get a glass of water, and the bedroom door at the end of the hall was open 3 inches, and Marlo's voice carried the way voices carry in old houses with hardwood floors and not enough furniture to absorb the sound. "He's been meeting with someone named Callum Bellamy," she was saying. "He asked me about a woman named Alara." I stopped walking. What Vaughn's voice was different from any version of it I had heard in 7 weeks. Not loud, he was never loud, but stripped of something. The smoothness was gone, and what was underneath it was faster, harder, less managed. What exactly did he say? How long has he been talking to them? Did he tell you what they told him? "Vaughn, why are you—" "How long, Marlo?" A pause, then Marlo's voice confused and slightly pulled back. "I don't know. I just saw the name in his phone last night. I didn't read the messages. I thought you'd want to know, because you said that family. What did your father say about Alara?" The control was back in his voice now, but it was effortful. I could hear the effort, the way you hear a floorboard holding weight it was not built for. Did he say her name specifically, or did he just ask if you knew her? He just asked if I knew someone by that name. I said no. "Vaughn, you're scaring me a little." "I'm not trying to scare you." Smooth again, almost. "I'm worried, babe. That family has serious issues. I've told you about the Bellamys. Your father doesn't understand what he's getting into. He's talking to people who have been trying to cause problems for us for a long time, and he doesn't know the history." A longer pause. Then Marlo, "Okay." Just that. Okay. The word of a woman who has learned that okay ends things faster than questions do. I walked back to my room without the glass of water, and sat down on the edge of my bed and pressed both hands flat against my knees. My heart was moving faster than usual, which surprised me. I had thought I was past being surprised by anything in this house. But what I had just heard had not surprised me. It had confirmed something which is a different sensation entirely. Confirmation does not surprise. It lands. What I had just heard was Vaughn Hale, for the first time in 7 weeks, lose the shape of himself. Every conversation I had witnessed him have with Marlo, with me, with the neighbors, with the contractor who had come to fix the sprinkler, had been managed calibrated smooth at every edge. He did not react to things. He responded to them, which is an entirely different operation and requires a different part of the brain. But the name Alara had not gone through that process. It had bypassed it entirely and hit something raw and unprocessed underneath something that had not had time to be managed because it was not something he had expected to hear in his own bedroom on a Sunday morning. A man does not react that way to the name of someone he barely knows. I picked up my phone and typed to Callum. He heard. He knows I know something. "We move tomorrow." The reply came back in 4 minutes. "Confirmed. Margaret will have everything ready by 9 a.m. I'll be in the Figueroa office. Bring Marlo if you can get her out of the house without him knowing." I set the phone down and looked at the wall. The hard part was not what came next for Vaughn. The hard part was what came next for Marlo. She was going to have to sit in a room and look at evidence about the man she had built 6 years of her life with, and she was going to have to do it while still carrying 6 years of conditioning. That told her she was the one who remembered things wrong, who was too sensitive, who did not understand the details. I could not protect her from that. What I could do was make sure that when she sat in that room, she was not alone and that everything on the table was true. That evening, Vaughn placed the investment folder on the coffee table in front of Marlowe for the third time. "I really need you to sign these this week," he said. "The window on the tax structure closes at the end of the month. We've talked about this." Marlowe reached for the folder. Her fingers touched the cover. "Marlowe," my voice came out calm, and even from the armchair across the room. "What is it you're signing?" She looked at me, then at Vaughn, then at me again, and something moved across her face, a flicker of the same uncertainty I had watched her suppress a dozen times in 7 weeks. Vaughn picked up the folder smoothly. "You know what? Let me clarify a few things with the accountant first," he said. "No rush." He smiled at me, the full, warm, practiced smile. "Good call, Silas." I smiled back. "Just looking out for family," I said. That night I wrote the date at the top of a new page in my notebook. Below it, I wrote one line: tomorrow. Vaughn left at 7:15 for a client meeting in Century City. I heard his car back out of the driveway and counted to 60 before I knocked on Marlowe's door. She answered in her robe, coffee in hand, hair not yet done. She looked at my face, and something in her own went careful. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said. "But I need you to come somewhere with me this morning, just you and me, 1 hour. If I'm wrong about everything I'm about to show you, I will never bring it up again. I promise you that." She studied me, the way she had studied things since she was small, thoroughly from multiple angles, the instinct of someone trained to read structures. "Does Vaughn know?" The question landed between us. "When's the last time you went somewhere without telling him first?" I asked quietly. Her mouth opened, then it closed. She looked down at the coffee in her hand, and I watched something move through her. Not anger, not yet, but the particular discomfort of a question that has found something real to press against. She was dressed in 20 minutes. Margaret Osei's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Bunker Hill, with a view of the downtown skyline and a conference table long enough to hold everything we needed to put on it. Callum was already there when we arrived, standing by the window in the same dark suit he had worn to his father's funeral. And when Marlowe saw him, she went very still. "You're Orson's son," she said. "Yes," Callum said. "I'm sorry we're meeting this way." Margaret placed everything on the table methodically, the way you lay out the components of something that needs to be understood in a specific order. The photograph of Vaughn and Alara, the Halcyon Bridge Partners LLC registration, Vaughn's name in the registered agent field, pages from Orson's journal. Diana's folder emails text the unsigned contract, Silas's 22 pages of dated handwritten notes, and last, side by side, Diana's contract and the investment restructuring folder Silas had photographed in his own living room. Marlowe sat across from it all, with her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold. "There has to be an explanation," she said. Her voice was steady. "Vaughn would never—" "Look at the 2 contracts," I said gently. "Just those 2. She looked. She was a structural engineer. She read plans for a living load, calculations connection, details the hidden logic of how things were built to hold or to fail. I watched her eyes move across both pages, and I watched the moment they stopped moving. Her coffee cup crinkled slightly in her grip. "He didn't rewrite it," she said, almost to herself. "He changed the names," I said. Marlowe set the coffee cup down very carefully on the table. She picked up the photograph of Vaughn and Alara, the restaurant patio summer light. Alara laughing with her head tilted back open and unguarded and completely unaware. And Marlowe's face did something I had not seen it do in 7 weeks. It stopped being managed. Her chin went first, a small tremor quickly controlled, then not controlled. Her eyes filled and overflowed before she could stop them, and she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, and her shoulders curved inward, and she made a sound that was not quite crying, and not quite not crying. The sound of something that has been held under pressure for a very long time, finding the first available exit. I moved my chair next to hers and put my hand on her back and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that was more useful than being there. After a while, she straightened. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She looked at the photograph one more time and set it face down on the table. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough to make sure you'd be safe before I said a word," I said. She nodded. Then she looked at Margaret. "What do we do now?" Margaret opened a fresh folder. "Now," she said, "we file." We drove back to Los Feliz in 2 cars, Marlowe in hers, me following in the truck, and the whole way, I watched her brake lights in front of me and thought about the particular courage it takes to drive toward the thing you have just spent 6 years being told did not exist. She parked and went straight inside without hesitating. That was my daughter. We moved quickly and without discussion, the way people move when they have agreed on something, and talking about it would only slow them down. Marlo went to the bedroom for her passport, her social security card, the folder of financial documents she kept in the nightstand. In the doorway, she paused. "He used to move things," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Your keys, your glasses. He told me you were getting forgetful. I believed him." She said it without looking at me, and then she kept walking. I went to my room for my notebook, my wallet, the few things that were mine and had always been mine. In the hallway, she stopped in front of a framed photograph on the wall, the two of them at Lake Tahoe 3 years ago, both laughing at something outside the frame. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she straightened the frame by a 1/4 inch perfectly level and walked past it without taking it down. I understood that. You do not have to take everything with you to leave. She was pulling a second bag from the hall closet when we both heard it, the sound of a car in the driveway. Not her car. The particular low note of Vaughn's engine, which I had learned the way. You learn the sounds of a house. Marlo went very still. "It's okay," I said. "I know," she said, and her voice was steadier than I expected. She zipped the bag. Vaughn came through the front door and stopped in the entrance hallway. He took in the bags by the door, Marlo standing with her coat on me, with my jacket and my notebook under my arm. Something moved across his face, rapid, complicated, resolved in under a second, into a version of concern so well constructed it might have fooled me 3 weeks ago. "What's going on?" he said. His voice was warm, worried. "Marlo, what happened?" Marlo looked at her husband. She looked at him the way you look at a blueprint when you finally understand what it was actually designed to do, clearly, completely, without the softening effect of hope. "I know about Alara," she said. Vaughn's eyes moved to me, fast and sharp, the fastest thing I had seen him do in 8 weeks, and behind the sharpness was something that was not anger and not fear, but a rapid recalculation, the look of a man who has just understood that the board has changed and is already counting his remaining pieces. "Silas." His voice had changed. The warmth was gone, not replaced by coldness exactly, but by something more honest. The flat register of a man who has decided that performance is no longer necessary. "Whatever they told you." "I read the blueprints, Vaughn," I said. "All of them." He opened his mouth, closed it. Marlo picked up her bag and walked past him toward the door. She did not touch him, and she did not look at him again. She just walked past him the way you walk past something that no longer has the ability to stop you. I followed her out. Behind us, Vaughn said her name once, Marlo, and there was something in it that might have been genuine, or might have been the last available instrument in a toolkit that had just been emptied. I did not turn around to determine which. We loaded the bags into Marlo's car. The street was quiet, the jacaranda trees dropping purple flowers onto the sidewalk in the morning light. Marlo stood at the driver's door and looked back at the house for a moment, just a moment, and then she got in. I walked around to the side gate to the back garden one more time. Callum was already there. I had texted him the night before, a single line: "Tomorrow morning, the fence comes down." He had not replied, but he had come. He had taken down half the fence the previous evening, the boards stacked neatly on Orson's side, and he was working on the second half, now a pry bar in his hand, methodical and unhurried. He looked up when I came through the gate. Vaughn appeared at the back door of the house. He looked at the fence at the gap where it had been at Callum, standing on the other side with a pry bar and an expression that required no interpretation. "You have no right," Vaughn started. Callum reached into his jacket and produced his phone. He turned the screen toward Vaughn. The TRO notification from LA Superior Court filled the display. Vaughn Hale, respondent, prohibited from disposing of, transferring, or encumbering any marital asset pending hearing. Vaughn stared at the screen. He looked at Callum. He looked at me. He looked down at his hands. "Where will she go?" he said, and his voice had lost every layer it had ever carried. The warmth, the management, the performance, and what was left underneath was smaller than I had expected. "That," I said, "is no longer your concern." I walked back through the gate and got in my truck and drove away from the house on the hill in Los Feliz, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. I heard what happened next from Callum that same evening over the phone. He had stayed at the fence after I drove away, not to confront Vaughn, he said, but because he had promised his father he would be there when it was done, and he was a man who kept promises, even when keeping them was uncomfortable. Vaughn had stood at the back door of the house for a long time after I left, looking at the gap where the fence had been looking at Callum on the other side of it. Then Vaughn had come down the porch steps. "You think this is over," Vaughn said. His voice had found some of its control again, not all of it, but enough to be dangerous in a different way than before. "You think a restraining order ends this? I have attorneys, Callum. I have resources. This is going to get ugly for everyone." Callum told me he had looked at Vaughn for a long moment at the yard, at the house, at the man standing in it, and thought about his father spending the last 8 months of his life in the rental next door, writing everything down in a leather journal, dividing his evidence into 3 parts because he knew someone would try to take it. "It's already ugly," Callum said. "It's been ugly for 4 years. You just didn't have to look at it until now." Vaughn had pulled out his phone. Whether he was calling his attorney or checking something else, Callum could not say. What Callum could say was that when Vaughn opened his banking app, a reflex perhaps, checking something he checked a dozen times a day, the man's face went through a sequence of expressions that Callum described to me as the most honest thing he had ever seen Vaughn do. The TRO had been served to his financial institutions that afternoon. Every marital account was flagged. Every pending transaction involving joint assets was frozen, pending the court hearing. Halcyon Bridge Partners, LLC, had received its own separate notice from Margaret's office. Vaughn tried to call Marlo. She did not answer. He tried twice more. She did not answer either time. Then he called someone else, his personal attorney, Callum assumed, based on the shift in his posture and the way his voice dropped to something clipped and precise. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Vaughn put the phone in his pocket and stood very still in the center of the yard, and Callum said that the stillness was different from the stillness of a man thinking. It was the stillness of a man who has just been told something he did not want to hear. Callum picked up his pry bar and went back to work on the last section of fence. Vaughn went inside and did not come back out. The next morning, 2 things happened before 9 o'clock. The first was a certified letter from the California Department of Real Estate, delivered to Vaughn's office address, notifying him that his real estate broker license had been placed on inactive status pending investigation of allegations of financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The DRE did not need a criminal conviction to act. A credible complaint, filed with supporting documentation, was sufficient to trigger a review, and Margaret's filing had been thorough. The second was a phone call to Vaughn's cell from a number with an LAPD prefix. Detective Raymond Suarez calling from the department's major crimes unit, requesting that Mr. Hale make himself available for a voluntary interview at his earliest convenience regarding the death of one Orson James Bellamy. The word voluntary in Callum's experience watching his father work cases for 2 decades meant something specific. In that context, it meant that declining would be noted, and that the next contact would be less voluntary. Callum told me all of this at 7 in the evening, sitting in the parking lot of the hotel where Marlo and I had checked in that afternoon, a decent place in Silver Lake, not far from Diana's house, chosen for no particular reason, except that it was available, and Marlo knew the neighborhood. When he finished, there was a pause on the line. "How's Marlo?" he asked. I looked through the window of the hotel room, where my daughter was sitting on the bed with her shoes off and her phone in her lap, not looking at it, just holding it the way you hold something when you need your hands to be occupied. "She's doing what she needs to do," I said. "That sounds like her," Callum said. And there was something in his voice that surprised me, a warmth that had not been there before, or had been there, and I had not noticed it until now. "Your father would have liked her," I said, a longer pause this time. "Yeah," Callum said quietly. "He would have." I said goodnight and hung up and sat in the rental car in the parking lot for a few minutes before going inside. The evening was cool, the kind of October cool that Los Angeles manages about 4 times a year, and the lights of the city were spread out below the hill, in the particular way that makes you understand why people have always come here, believing that things can be different. I thought about Vaughn standing alone in his yard, with his banking app open and his face doing the most honest thing it had ever done. I thought about Orson's leather journal and the 3 careful parts and the key that had opened exactly what it was supposed to open. And I thought about a man I had never met who had spent the last year of his life standing at a fence watching, waiting, making sure that When the structure finally came down, the right people were standing clear of it. I got out of the car and went inside to my daughter. Marlo called Nadia at 8 o'clock the next morning, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed in the same clothes she had slept in, her hair still uncombed, her phone in both hands the way she used to hold things as a child when she was nervous about them. I was sitting in the armchair by the window, pretending to read the newspaper. I was not reading the newspaper. She stared at the screen for a long time. 2 years was a long time to not call someone. Long enough that you start to wonder whether the door is still there, whether you have left it too long, whether the person on the other side has moved on and built something new in the space you used to occupy. She pressed call. It rang once. Marlo. Nadia's voice came through the phone, loud enough that I could hear it from across the room. Not a question, not a greeting. Just her name said, the way you say the name of someone you have been waiting to hear from for 2 years. Tell me where you are. I'm coming. Marlo's face did something complicated and then uncomplicated itself into something much simpler. She pressed her free hand flat against her sternum like she was holding something in place. Silver Lake, she said, and her voice cracked on the second syllable, and she did not try to fix it. We're at the hotel on... I know the one, Nadia said. 40 minutes, don't move. She arrived in 35, in a yellow raincoat that was excessive for the weather, and entirely characteristic of her, and she hugged Marlo in the doorway for a long time, without saying anything, and Marlo's shoulders shook once, twice, then steadied. Over Nadia's shoulder, Marlo looked at me, and I nodded and took my newspaper and went to sit in the lobby downstairs, because some things a father helps with, and some things a father steps out of the way of. The lobby had good coffee and a view of the parking lot, and I sat there for an hour and a half and drank 2 cups and watched people come and go and thought about how ordinary the world looks from the outside of other people's lives. That afternoon, Margaret filed the divorce petition at the Los Angeles County Superior Court. Under California's community property law, every asset accumulated during the marriage, every account, every investment, every piece of real property was subject to full disclosure and equitable division. Halcyon Bridge Partners, LLC, and whatever Vaughn had moved through it during 6 years of marriage would be examined by a forensic accountant. The timeline of transactions, the source of funds, the destination of money that had gone in but never come back out under Marlo's name. Everything that had been designed to be opaque would now be required by court order to be transparent. Margaret had explained this to Marlo the previous morning, in the calm, specific way of a woman who has built her career on making sure people understand exactly what is happening to them. Marlo had listened with the focused attention of an architect, reading a structural report, absorbing the load, calculating the implications, deciding what she could carry and what needed to come down. Will it take long? Marlo had asked. The financial audit alone could take 6 months, Margaret had said. But the TRO protects you while it happens. He cannot move. Assets cannot encumber property, cannot take any action that would diminish the marital estate. Whatever he has, it stays where it is until the court says otherwise. Marlo had nodded. Good, she said. One word, flat and final. That evening, Callum called with an update on the Orson matter. Detective Suarez had reached a decision. The combination of Callum's formal request, Orson's symptomage journal, with its precise dates and times the results of a private toxicology screening Callum had commissioned immediately after his father's death, showing abnormal compound levels in Orson's hair samples, consistent with gradual exposure, and the documented evidence of Vaughn's unauthorized entry into Orson's residence during his hospitalization had been sufficient to justify ordering an official forensic examination. The results would take several weeks. The investigation was formally open. He told me it doesn't mean they'll find anything conclusive, Callum said. His voice was careful, measured. It means they're looking, which is what my father wanted. It's what he deserved, I said. A pause. Yeah, Callum said. It is. After I hung up, I went back upstairs. Nadia was still there. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed next to Marlo, with takeout containers between them, some reality television program on, with the sound low. It looked so ordinary. So completely, almost painfully ordinary. Marlo looked up when I came in. There's pad thai, she said. Nadia ordered approximately 3 times what 2 people could eat. I ordered for 3, Nadia said without looking up from the television. I assumed the dad would come back eventually. I pulled the chair up to the bed and took the container Nadia held out and ate pad thai in a Silver Lake hotel room with my daughter and her best friend, while the television murmured something nobody was really watching, and for the first time in 8 weeks, I felt the particular relief of a structure that has been under load for too long finally being allowed to settle. Marlo fell asleep before 10. Nadia tucked a blanket over her with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before, many times in the years before. Vaughn had decided that Nadia was too much drama for his wife to deal with. At the door, Nadia stopped and looked at me. "She called me," she said quietly. "After 2 years, she called me." She pressed her lips together. "Whatever you did, thank you." "Her father did it," I said. "A different one." Nadia looked at me for a moment, then nodded once like that made sense to her, and left. I sat in the armchair and opened my notebook to a new page and wrote the date at the top. Below it, I wrote one line. She called Nadia. She's coming back. Then I closed the notebook and turned off the light and listened to the sound of my daughter breathing steadily in the dark and thought about tomorrow. I read the last pages of Orson's journal that night after Marlo fell asleep. I had been carrying it since the Figueroa office in my jacket pocket, then in my bag, the leather warm from being close to a body for days. I sat in the armchair by the window with the city spread out below and opened it to the last entry. Orson's handwriting was the same careful block print throughout, deliberate, even the writing of a man who understood that what he put on a page might need to be read by someone else and wanted to be clearly understood. The last pages were different from the earlier ones, not in the handwriting which stayed steady, but in the quality of what was written. Earlier entries were documentation dates, observations, vehicle descriptions, transaction references. The last pages were something else. He wrote about Alara. Not the investigation, not the evidence or the timeline or the entity structure, just her. The way she used to call him on Sunday mornings. The argument they had the last real argument about a man she was seeing who her father did not trust, and how she had told him he was overprotective, and he had told her she was not being careful enough, and how neither of them had been entirely wrong. He wrote about the Sunday morning he had tried to call her, and she had not picked up, and the Sunday after that, and the one after that, and the drive he had eventually made to her apartment, and the way the super had looked at him when he asked to be let in. He wrote about standing at her graveside in the rain, and understanding for the first time that the thing he had spent 22 years doing as a detective, building cases, finding evidence, making the truth visible, was not going to be enough. Not this time. The truth was there. He could see it. He just could not prove it in the way the law required proof. So he had done the only other thing he could think of. "I cannot give Alara back," he wrote in the last full paragraph. "I cannot undo what was done. I have spent 4 years trying to find the thing that would let me hand this to someone with a badge and walk away knowing it was finished. I don't think that's going to happen the way I planned. But I found something else instead. I found a man living in the house next door who asks about his daughter before he asks about anything else, who listens before he speaks, who turned down an offer of help in the first week and wrote it down on paper. A man who picks up notices from the mailbox board and reads them twice before putting them in his pocket. A man like that comes to funerals. I don't know if that's enough. I only know that it's what I have. If I'm gone before I can speak, find Silas. A father will understand a father." I closed the journal. I sat in the dark for a long time, not thinking exactly more the way a structure settles after a load has been removed, finding its new resting point. Outside Los Angeles went on, being Los Angeles indifferent and enormous, and lit up in every direction, full of people living their ordinary lives inside their ordinary walls, most of them unaware of the things those walls contained. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth hard and felt my eyes fill and overflow for the first time since I had opened that envelope at the funeral home. Not for myself, not even entirely for Marlo, who was sleeping in the other bed and would wake up tomorrow and begin the long work of becoming herself again. Mostly for a man I had spoken to twice through a gap in a fence, who had spent the last year of his life making sure I would be in the right place at the right time for a reason he never got to explain directly. I let myself cry for a few minutes quietly in the dark. Then I dried my face and went to sleep. In the morning, I drove back to Los Feliz one last time. I did not go inside the house. I went around the side gate to the back garden, and Callum was already there. No arrangement had been made. We had not discussed it. He was simply there the way some things simply happen when they are right. He had a pry bar and a stack of boards he had started the previous morning, and he handed me a second pry bar without being asked. We worked in the kind of quiet that is not silence, but the sound of two people doing something that does not require words. The October morning was cool, the light coming in low, and gold through the trees, and the boards came away cleanly. Vaughn had built with good materials, at least, and good materials come apart as well as they go together. The last board came down, and we set it with the others and stood back. Orson's garden was visible now, the whole of it, the raised beds that had gone to weeds since he had stopped being able to tend them. A rosebush he had clearly loved, at one point still alive, but ragged at the edges, struggling the way things struggle when they have not had enough attention. A bird bath, concrete listing, slightly to the left. Pots of herbs along the southern wall, some of them dead, some of them not. It was not a grand thing, it was just a yard. But it had been his, and now you could see it. Callum stood beside me with his hands at his sides, looking at what his father had planted and tended, and ultimately left behind. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were wet, and he did not try to manage either one. "He would have liked you, Mr. Whitmore," he said. I looked at the rosebush, ragged and struggling and still alive. "I know," I said. "I think I would have liked him too." We stood there for a few minutes more, in the low October light, looking at the garden that had been hidden for 6 months behind 10 feet of dark wood, now open to the sky. Then Callum picked up the pry bar and the stack of boards to take to the truck, and I took the other stack and we carried them out the side gate and stacked them on the curb for collection. I drove back to Silver Lake. Marla was awake when I came in, sitting at the small desk by the window, with her laptop open, doing the thing she had always done when she was working through something difficult. Filling her hands with work, she understood and trusted, letting her mind process the other thing alongside it. She looked up when I came in. "Where did you go?" she asked. "Los Feliz," I said. "To take down the rest of the fence." She looked at me for a moment, then she turned back to her laptop and said, "Good," and kept working. I sat in the armchair and opened my notebook to a fresh page. I wrote the date. Below it, I wrote the thing I had been trying to find the right words for since I had sat in a parking lot in East LA and watched a man in a dark suit walk toward me with an envelope and a key. In 30 years as a structural engineer, I built things meant to last. I tested foundations. I read blueprints. I found the cracks before they became collapses. I thought I was good at it, but I almost missed the most important structure of all, the one my daughter had been living inside invisible for 6 years. Orson Bellamy never built anything. He just stood at a fence and watched. And in the end, that was enough. He didn't need to tear anything down. He just needed to make sure the right person was looking. I was looking now. Watch who walks into your daughter's house. I was watching. I closed the notebook and set it on the desk and sat back in the chair and watched my daughter work in the morning light and thought about how strange and how ordinary it is, the things we do for the people we love and the lengths we are willing to go to make sure they are still there when the walls come down. I have told you the truth about what happened in that house on the hill in Los Feliz, all of it. What I learned, what this family story taught me at 65 years old, is that love without attention is just a door left unlocked. I was so grateful someone wanted me close that I stopped asking why. Do not be like me. Do not sign away your judgment because someone makes you feel needed. Do not let comfort become blindness. I believe, and I have always believed, that God places people in our lives at precisely the moment we need them most. Orson Bellamy was not a coincidence. He was a warning delivered by someone who had already paid the price I almost paid. The man at the fence was never watching us. He was watching out for us. This is the truth about family betrayal. It does not arrive wearing a mask. It arrives wearing your trust, your gratitude, your longing to belong somewhere. That is what makes it so devastating. And that is what makes stories like this family story of a father, a fence, and a man who watched from the other side worth telling. I have my own opinion. The most dangerous person in your life is never the one standing outside your door. It is the one who already has the key. If this family story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love, leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe that stories like this one matter, stories of family betrayal survived and overcome, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another. Thank you for staying until the very end. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for the purpose of exploring real human experiences. If this kind of content is not for you, we understand. Please feel free to explore other content that suits you better.